Well, at NICER, we work on many different projects, some long-term and some short-term. So some of the current projects are, we're looking at migration, inequality, and development at the Nepal-Malaysia corridor. It's a part of MIDEC research, which is a 5 years research program in around 12 countries. Some other work that are underway are, we're looking at adolescent and internal migration. We're looking at my social protection. So these are some of the work that I'm currently engaged in. When we try to understand the impact, I think we'll have to look at it in a combination of two ways. So one, the way COVID has impacted a migrant because he's a part of a Nepali population. The other way are some of the specificities that are related to the person being a migrant. So I'm going to focus on the second one, perhaps. So if we look at the impact, I think we have to look at different types of migrants. So if we just look at labor migrants, then there are people who are already working in the destination. So loss of jobs, lack of human right violation, lack of access to basic services, and increase in discrimination are some of the ways in which COVID has impacted migration. Generally, Nepali migrants face human right violations and discrimination in the destination, but because of COVID, this has become even more challenging. Some of the direct impacts are the infection itself on the migrants. So already last year in May, the Nepal Non-Resident Nepalese Association found that 10,000 Nepalese were infected only in Gulf, and in Malaysia, the chief labor destination, the infections have become more this year. Then there are deaths related to the infection, but also deaths in general, which are very high in some countries like Malaysia already. The second impact on these people who are already in the destination are loss of jobs, end of labor contracts. So, I mean, it's the second year that we have been facing this pandemic. Usually Nepali laborers go for a contractual job. Their contracts are usually for 2 years. So you'll find that in the 2 years, a lot of people have already, their job contracts have already expired, which means that they're staying illegally in the country if they are unable to come back. Then you'll have to look at people who were aspiring for migration. So there are around 115,000 people who had taken their labor permits, which means that they had already, they were on the verge of migration when the lockdown started. Then there are around 328,000 people who had taken pre-labor approval, which means that they had started the process, had invested a lot on going abroad for work. So the main impact on these people are they are unable to go now, which means that they have taken loans and they don't have a job to pay it back. So usually the interest rate are very high, around 36%, which means that every month they are incurring an interest of 36% without having the means to pay it back. So this is a huge challenge for people now. And I told about the I told about the people who have lost their jobs. So, a significant number of people have lost their jobs. It's around 527,000 people who wanted to come back during the pandemic when the Nepal government did a survey. So these are due to loss of jobs. So, and high returns as well. People who had returned during the pandemic, but also people who had just before the pandemic come to Nepal on a holiday. Usually they get a month to 3 months of holiday. So a lot of people had returned for holidays. They are unable to come back. So these are some of the impacts. I think that there are a lot of social and economical factors that kind of affects how people take decisions and why people migrate, why people take the decision to migrate. So there are things like family aspiration for migration, which is very high in some of the communities in Nepal. There are aspirations of adolescents themselves. They want to go out, explore the world, earn an income. There are social norms which drives a lot of men to take risky paths. So So the social norms where men are the breadwinners of the family and they are forced to migrate. So, and then there are other economic factors which combine with these factors. So for example, for the same kind of qualification and skills that you have, the income that you have in Nepal is much less compared to what you would earn abroad. The income is not regular because mostly those people would be working as daily wage labor in the country, which means that you do not have employment throughout the year. The other thing is the easy availability of loans for people who want to migrate. So if you say, I want to migrate, you'll easily get loans for migration. But if you say that you want to start something in Nepal and then ask for loans, you will not get that loan from people, because generally people take loans from informal sources, like they're within their own network. They don't go to banks for taking the loans. And these informal sources usually think that if you go abroad, there's a high chance that you'll pay back the loan. Whereas in Nepal, if you do entrepreneurship, you might be at a loss and never get back the money. So that's why these factors are they play a big role. And for people who want to migrate or people who are migrating, COVID is just like among one of the risks that a lot of migrants usually understand the risk. They have a lot of other risks. So it is just one risk among a myriad of other risks that people usually take into their stride and migrate when they are migrating. So, and for them, it is just a one-off risk. COVID is also very the country is already on the brink of a humanitarian crisis. I think in Asia, Nepal is one of the worst infected country now in the second wave by migrants. So people, like for them, staying at home or going to the destination in terms of COVID is not a big difference. It's the same. And it is just one risk compared to like 10 other or maybe 50 other risks that migrants already know that they'll face when they are in a destination. So when these two factors, the socioeconomic factors and the risk of COVID combines, I think more people will be migrating. We have already seen that when 600,000 people returned from India, already in 3 months of staying in the country, they were re-migrating again to India. We have been talking to local agents in the MEDEC research, where we find that there is a lot of pressure now on the local agents to send people abroad. A lot of people are already flocking, in the agent's door to trying to get out of the country as soon as possible because of the high debt they have already incurred when they are staying here, and the loss of jobs and lack of jobs here. So I think people will still take the decision to migrate, despite the fact that the government has already invested a lot. It has allocated a lot of money on reintegration, particularly economic reintegration of the returnees and of the migrants, so that people are not forced to migrate due to economic reason. But if you look at the government, it is reeling from the second wave already. So despite very good intentions to, put the money in on reintegration and creating jobs for returnees, the government will have to pull a lot of this money into into fighting with COVID now because of the current situation. So whatever it had intended to do for economic reintegration might not be possible with the budget in this year.